Hello and welcome back to If Clothes Could Talk, the web series that uncovers the beautiful, the slightly strange, and the wildly fascinating world of fashion history. My name is Liv Hutley. I'm an emerging production and costume designer based here in Australia who's very keen to learn about the wide and pretty strange world of fashion history. And I am joined by the stunning Ellie Gunton. Who's an emerging archaeologist.
Darling.
And lover of old things generally.
I do. I love old things.
You do love old things.
Do you want to know about my recent old thing find?
What is it?
I have a newspaper.
Yeah.
From July 1969.
That's hot.
And it says on the cover, "Man walks on moon."
That's really cool.
It is. I'm getting it framed.
I love it.
But that's not relevant because... Today's episode is all about female pirates, and I am super excited.
I'm very keen. So, pirates have long been an exciting and adventurous story that we as consumers have seen played out in film, television, novels, songs.
Who doesn't love a good sea shanty?
I love sea shanties and live theatre. But what comes to mind when we think of pirates? Eye patches, wooden legs, black flags, lots of flowy linen, very cottagecore. But who were these pirates and what did they actually look like? So today we will try and separate fact from fiction and talk about what we know, how we know it, and how you can find out more.
Exactly. Let's be real. Pirates have been around as long as there have been boats. People have always stolen things, and pirates are essentially just thieves who lived on the water and preyed on ships. Pirates were not good people. Let's just say that at the outset. These were murderers, thieves, and slave traders, so don't get too romantic. The modern age of piracy that has been portrayed in film and television is rather romanticized and could arguably be said to begin with colonization and globalization, the beginning of what Western historians call modern history.
So, for some context, colonization is the invasion of a country or countries by a nation who seeks to take occupation of that land for both their people and for profiting purposes. Colonization is greatly connected to modern understandings of racism and inequality. Often colonization was framed as exploring, and many people took to the oceans to map the new world. And when new, it wasn't new, land was found, further trade commenced. Trade of not only goods and wealth, but people. The slave trade was a direct effect of colonization, and piracy enabled slavery to grow to the scale that it has. Laws were also very sketchy, especially around the UK. They didn't match up all over the world, and so loopholes were very easy to find. So, Elle, can you tell us a little bit more, though, about the history of piracy? Like, where did they come from?
I know it feels like we've just thrown a textbook at you, but here's the fun bit. The golden age of piracy that we see in films like Pirates of the Caribbean actually only lasted for 10 years.
That's very short.
From 1712 to 1722. Lots of famous pirates came out of this era, but there were so many more pirates in antiquity, Viking ages, and even contemporary times. What has become obvious to me is that pirate fashion is reliant on regional trends and is also dependent on the era, so we can't actually narrow down one pirate uniform. Here, signing up.
Here's your uniform.
But we can observe some trends and specific themes that we can discuss.
Amazing. Okay, so what did pirates wear? Can you give like a general overview?
Obviously, it depends when and which pirates you're talking about. But if we're going to talk about classic pirates, we do know a few things. First of all, in the 16th century, Elizabeth I had sumptuary laws about which classes could wear certain fabrics and colours. Pirates frequently disobeyed this. They would often wear the band clothing on purpose. Pirates would also wear a mismatch of items, combining their threadbare sailing clothing with the clothing that they had stolen from ships.
Bold.
Clothing was a monetary commodity, and often clothing would be given as gifts to members of royal courts and wealthy members of the aristocracy. Clothing was so expensive that they would be worth capturing and using in trade. So if you were a pirate, you would quite often steal the rich clothing that you found on boats and then naturally wear it.
Oh, a little bit of a mix match. much.
Yes,
I love it. It's like a really cool op shop. Yeah, so when it comes to this era of sailing wear, it is important to understand that lightweight clothing was not a choice, but a harsh reality for many of the lower classes. Marine clothing in the 17th and 18th century, as demonstrated by the British Admiralty, followed similar fashion trends in England and Ireland, and it is the coat that is of particular interest to me. So light linen shirts, everywhere, boring, but coats were known as doublets, and now doublets were a big deal in this era, and they were both popular in the army and with those who flouted the law. The outfit known as the slops was introduced in the early 17th century, and it was an outfit that was pretty standard among all sailors under the British Admiralty. This was loose-fitting knee breeches, stockings, a linen shirt, vest, and doublet. And because many soldiers then became pirates, it's natural that the fashion followed. So let's look into a little bit more about exactly who these pirates were. Specifically, a very special woman named Grace O'Malley, our queen. We will be using Grace as an example throughout this episode to discuss the fashion of female pirates and how it related to gender presentation and ideas at the time.
Yeah, so gender is a super interesting lens to look at this topic through. Pirates came in a variety of genders. Because the ocean was a law unto itself, often gender was set to the side and people made their own rules. Because of the relaxed social rules, often women were able to rise to power in piracy. While researching, I fell down an inevitable rabbit hole and found so many amazing stories about female pirate queens. There have been so many, and I must admit, I had no idea. But that's because our ideas of history have been skewed by those who wrote it. And who wrote it?
Men!
Would they have included terrifying female pirates who smashed their idea of the patriarchal binary?
No!
Yeah. So let's chat Grace O'Malley, my ultimate queen. She was fearless and much talked about, especially during the late 16th century. She was so infamous that she even had a meeting with Queen Elizabeth I, which is incredible.
I'm gonna be a fly on the wall in that conversation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Icons.
I want to time travel just for that.
Just for that.
Grace had a really interesting life. She was the daughter of quite a wealthy Irish chieftain and wanted to be a part of his piracy trade. But her father would not let her because she was a girl.
No go.
So she cut off her hair and dressed as a boy to show her dedication to wanting to be a pirate. And her father allowed her to join them. The fact that she had to be masculine presenting in order to be accepted, even though they knew she was still female, is really interesting. Often in these pirate stories, we have women dressing as men to be accepted into the pirate crew, such as Mary Read. But we also have many other examples of women who were feminine and still accepted as the leaders of their crew.
So, for everyone playing along at home, this was the classic feminine look of the 16th century. So, most women would be getting around town in full, structured gowns with really close-fitting bodices and gathered skirts with a long train. They had elbow-length sleeves and decorative stomachers that would form a deep V shape just below the torso. So, not very practical for sea-bearing purposes.
Yeah, that's right. So it's hard to draw assumptions about what people wore, but here's what I think Grace's general vibe was. Ireland was the birthplace of many pirates, and so their culture and fashion is likely to have had an impact on the fashion of the piracy of the age. Marie Dunlevy wrote an excellent book called Dress in Ireland, and I will be drawing from much of her research. Ireland, like many countries, maintained a distinctly medieval style of dress in the 16th century. They kind of looked like the English had about a century before, and this was to maintain a sense of cultural independence at a time when the English were at war with Ireland. They were trying to take it over.
They were taking everyone.
So Ireland was like, no, I'm going to have my own spicy style. The contrast is well depicted in the images Dunlevy featured, of which we will show a few.
Here they are. So we've heard this story about Grace presenting masculine as a child. So it's very possible that she continued to present this way right into her adulthood, as it may have been easier for her to sail. Well, it would have been.
Yeah.
However, we also know that she ended up as a very wealthy individual and the leader of several clans. So we believe she would have worn a mix of peasant wear and gentry wear throughout her time at sea. So I think knee breeches and stockings with a linen shirt is likely, and when she was holding court, she probably would have worn a traditional Irish dress.
And to tell us more about these incredible pirate women in their clothes, we are being joined today by author Laura Sook Duncombe. Laura has written 2 books on this topic, A Pirate's Life for She and Pirate Women, the Princesses, Prostitutes and Privateers Who Ruled the Seven Seas. Thank you so much for joining us today, Laura.
Hi, Laura!
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Of course, of course. I love your set. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you very
much.
Thank you.
Okay, so how did you actually end up writing 2 books on female pirates?
Well, it was sort of by accident and also sort of just a product of destiny. I have always been interested in pirates. I loved them ever since I loved Peter Pan as a little girl. I grew up watching the Mary Martin Peter Pan. They play it here in the States on American Thanksgiving, or at least they used to. And I loved just watching the pirates singing and dancing and having a wonderful time. They seemed like they were having more fun than anyone else. So I kind of grew up loving them and just reading about them in my own spare time. And around high school, I was thinking that, you know, if there's male pirates, there has to be female pirates, right? Because if there's, you know, there's male of everything, there's going to be female of that too. And in that like sort of boundless naivete of like, you know, youth, I was like, yes, I'm sure that this is there and this has been written about and this is very easy to find. I started tracking them down. And the more I found them, when I went looking, they were everywhere. They're in every story, but they're just kind of tucked away. They're never the star. They're sort of like behind someone else, or, you know, so-and-so pirate and his wife. But it's like they're in the stories, and they're in the stories all the way back to, you know, the dawn of recorded history. So I realized that no one had really put them all together, and no one had really told their story as a whole, as sort of like a testament to the fact that women have always been pirates, and women have been pirates alongside of and frequently in command of male pirates. And it's just not something we talk about. So I was like, gosh darn it, I'm going to talk. So that I've been doing almost nothing else ever since, just talking about pirates.
I love that. That's incredible. So in doing that, what was your research process kind of like? Like, where did you even start to find that information?
Right. Well, I started, you know, kind of on my travels throughout my life. You know, when you go to, let's say, like the U.S. Virgin Islands, and you're in a gift shop that sells a bunch of like crazy T-shirts and, you know, like fake pirate coins, and then like there's like one sad dusty bookshelf in the corner with like 3 books, and you're like, who buys those? Like, I buy those. So, you know, that's like a locally published collection of like local lore. And so I had amassed a pretty significant collection of like books on pirates before I started this project. But then I also happened to be living in Washington, D.C. at the time. And so I had access to the Library of Congress. And so I was able to sort of request books from various eras. And, you know, I had my library reader card, and it was very exciting to me. And really just looking at anything about pirates to sort of see what breadcrumbs were laid out, and then following that trail from there to other things. But a lot of it is passed down through oral tradition. A lot of it is just, you know, not in like traditionally published books, but, you know, a book of volumes that someone's put out, like, you know, Treasure Coast Historical Society or something. And it's like a collection of stories that people have told. You know, the truth about pirates is not easy to find because they're not really record keepers. They're not really law-abiding folk. So a lot of it is just sort of, you know, lost. And then what we do have, the reliability of it is constantly called into question. We have so few, you know, verified historical documents, you know, newspapers from the time, primary source documents. But I think the myth and the legend of pirates is what we have, and that's what endures, and that's almost more important than like the, you know, the biographical, you know, Wikipedia entry data is sort of like why these stories persist, how they persist, and why they're just so darn popular even after all this time.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you had to pick, do you have a favorite female pirate, or could you not pick?
That's a very hard question. I try to, every time someone asks me that, to give like a different answer, because they're all my favorites on different days. But I'm really drawn to Grace O'Malley because she's an Irish pirate, and my family background is Irish, and also because she was known to be sort of a working mom pirate. She had her sons with her on her ships, and she had 3 sons. I have 2 sons. And I just kind of like the idea of like holding a baby on one hand and then like sword fighting with the other hand. Just she didn't let having kids like stop her from following her dreams. And I think that's a really, very important role model for me and for a lot of mothers. So that's why she resonates with me a lot.
Absolutely. So sort of segueing into that idea of like a gendered split, do we have any evidence of, I guess, like some sort of statistic to say how many female pirates were around in like the height of piracy, or is there really just no way to know?
So there's really no way to know, because we don't know how many women lived and died as men, and how many women were never caught. So we do have a quote from, and I think it's in Angus Constam's book. I don't have one of his books. I don't have it on my hand, but it's there, and this was from the time period of the 1700s. They said there's so many women serving in the English Navy that they might as well have their own like regiment. And so we know many women at least went to sea in the Navy disguised as men. So the only pirates we know about are ones who were caught, and who were caught as women. So, I'm sure many women went to the gallows, as men, and just, lived and died as men, and we never knew about them. So, I'm sure that the number of recorded pirates that we have is in no way sort of representative of the number of women pirates that there were, because the stories, history is told by the victors, and the victors are frequently, white cis men. So women get left out a lot, not even on purpose all the time, but just it's not part of the story. So I'm sure many men served with women they never even knew. So we don't have a real good idea, but I mean, we know that wherever men are, women are as well. And so I think, I'm not going to say like, half, but there could be, I'm just absolutely just, spitballing, but I'm going to say maybe like 15-20% of pirate fleets, I would say, were women.
Amazing.
Just based on absolutely nothing other than, wild speculation.
Noted. So they were dressing like men most of the time, but was there a mix of sort of feminine to masculine clothing, or was it really sort of we're only dressing like men?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So a lot of the women did sort of dress more in a more feminine way, in a way that they could not in the English Navy. We're talking specifically golden age of piracy. Like, if you're found out to be a woman, you're kicked out. But pirates were racially, religiously, ethnically, and like gender integrated in a way that the Navy, wasn't definitely at the time. And so there were women who were kind of like out as women and not in disguise. But I think they still dress, on a ship, you're not dressing for fashion, you're dressing for function, because, like a loose, scarf can get caught in a pulley in a line, and, it's very dangerous. The lives on the ships were extremely dangerous. A lot of pirates died from like shipboard accidents, had nothing to do with the life of being a pirate. Navy sailors died as well. So pirate clothing is not really the Captain Jack Sparrow sort of like, fantastic Captain Hook tricorn hat with a feather up to here get up that we think of. Some pirates did dress a little flashier than others. There's Calico Jack Rackham, who was known to be sort of a flashy dresser. But at the end of the day, pirates were tradesmen and women, and they had to dress in sort of the uniform of what would keep them safe on the ship. And so, they weren't always in disguise. And Mary Read and Anne Bonny, we have from their trial transcripts, there some people who had been captured by them testified against them, and the judge was like, well, did you know they were women? Like, yeah, they were obviously women. Like, we could tell they were women. We could like see their breasts, and the question, we don't know if it was like, you could see their breast, or just their clothes were cut in such a way that you could, I kind of prefer the former. I think that'd just be a shock tactic, just people were like, and then get captured. So it's there. I mean, we're not talking a bunch of petticoats and skirts in the fashion of the day. It's not like now where women can wear pants and it's no big deal. Even women who were out as women were not necessarily dressing in contemporary women's fashion, but they were definitely not dressing in the saucy wench costumes you see every Halloween. That was one of my biggest reasons for writing this book, is I just want to sort of dispel. I mean, if you ever Google female pirate, and I wouldn't recommend it, it's just lusty wench after lusty wench, and that's just those like stiletto boots would not be very practical on a ship. I'll tell you that. So I mean, they dressed for work because they were workers, and so that's a much more accurate picture of what they looked like.
Yeah, awesome. So do you think that there were sort of gender implications in terms of gender identity that was associated with being a female pirate? So were these sort of the first kind of non-binary presenting humans, or was the binary still like very much there and they were just dressing as men or dressing masculine?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, we have so few primary source documents that I almost don't want to speculate, because it's very easy to say, oh, there were 2 women on that ship, I bet they were lesbians, and it's like, it sells a lot of papers and it's very titillating, but we have no evidence that, Mary Read and Anne Bonny in particular for the Golden Age were lovers. We don't have any proof of that, in any like verifiable, source. So, I mean, we know that some of them were married to men. So that they were at least outwardly cis presenting. I really can't name any of them off the top of my head who I know identified explicitly as like non heterosexual. So I don't think. I mean, some of them very well, if they were living today, I often wonder if a lot of these women live today, like what their lives would be like. And I even, I hesitated to call the book Pirate Women because I was like, well, I don't even know if these people identified as women. And I don't want to say, I don't want to be so, gender binary. But, in the times that these pirates were living, the gender binary was obviously very firmly entrenched. And I think that we don't have any reason to believe necessarily that they were non-binary. I think maybe because that term didn't exist, that idea didn't exist. And so they were just kind of living their lives. I don't know if that's a very satisfying answer. I'm sorry.
No, I think it's a super like well-rounded point that we just don't have the evidence. But I certainly hope that one day in maybe finding some that we will, but in sort of understanding the modern ideas that we currently have today about women and working women, would you say that these women were sort of like the original feminists? Did they uphold feminist values, or were they sort of battling a lot of internalized misogyny, or did they uphold the binary in different ways?
That one I feel a little bit more confident about because, to me, feminism means that everyone deserves equal rights. And these women just reached out and took equal rights. And so, I absolutely believe they were feminists. So many of these women were faced with a life of either, sitting in a parlor, sipping tea and embroidering for upper class, or becoming a prostitute if they were lower class. And they just said, no, thank you. Like, that's not the life that I want. And they went out and joined one of the only occupations where a woman could, sort of make her own money and make her own way in the world that was available to them at that time. And so I think female pirates are very feminist. I think that they, and I think that every feminist is a little bit of a pirate, because the pirate just takes something that someone else thinks that they shouldn't have. And so I think, every woman who has had the courage or just the stubbornness to exist in a space where they knew that they weren't wanted are pirates. I think there's a little bit of pirate in all of us. So
amazing. So from your research, we in this episode have talked specifically about Grace O'Malley because we love her. We think she's amazing. So we've sort of done our own research about what we kind of think she would have worn, but do you have your own sort of thoughts on what Grace would have worn or women at her time would have worn on the open waters?
I mean, we have a woodcut of her from the time period that everyone that was sort of memorializing her her meeting with Queen Elizabeth. And she's in a dress in that, and that, that again, that's not like verified. That wasn't like a photograph that was snapped, but that was sort of, capturing the period of the day. And we have an idea what women on land were wearing at that time. So, but, Grace on ship, I can only imagine, trousers, like, I mean, now they, she's not sailing in the Caribbean, she's in the Irish Sea, so it's cold a lot of the time. So again, fabric that would keep them warm and not soggy wet if they're continuing to get rained on or splashed on. And so unfortunately, as much as we love the idea of a flamboyant pirate, again, I think that it's function over fashion at all times. And so I'm sure that Grace would have just dressed in the most efficient thing possible that would allow her to continue to, kick butt in every possible way. So although we know she did own dresses and she, allegedly met Queen Elizabeth in a dress, I was probably married both times in a dress, I'm sure she was wearing trousers on the sea.
Amazing. Cool. Awesome.
I think it's really cool what you're doing. I don't know if I mentioned I did a lot of costuming, and like I studied costuming, and I did some costuming semi-professionally after college, before I went off to law school and then took this radical turn and became a pirate scholar. So like I love clothes too. I love historical fashion in particular. So I was like, they're costume people, they're my people, this is exciting. So
amazing. Well, I mean, currently I work in film. I'm a graphic illustrator at the moment, but I've also studied costume design. That was my degree. But yeah, it's funny. I find that people who have been in costume or in theatre, which both of us have been, we kind of just conglomerate together. It's funny. But it's amazing to hear that, like, because I think clothes are such a crucial part of telling history and telling especially women's stories, because our clothing has been forced to be our defining feature for so long. So it's great to hear your thoughts on that sort of side of female pirates.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true, because I think, in my book, I talk about the Viking textiles, like the woven textiles, as like a historical document. And I think, so many women throughout the ages, like, could not read or write and like did not have access to, recording instruments. And so what did they record? They just record how they lived, and how they lived was dictated how they dressed. And so if you want to know like where somebody's from, you could probably open up a suitcase and not have any idea where the person's going, but they'd be like, oh, I bet they're going to the beach. Here's some sunglasses, here's some flip-flops, here's this, and so, clothes do make the man in many ways. And I think they make the woman as well. And particularly when we don't have, haven't had access to other ways to tell our stories. And so I think you can definitely, learn from the past. In the women of the past are always speaking to us, even if we don't have their written records. We have their clothes. We know how they dressed, and that helps us know what they did. So I think you guys are really onto something. I think it's super, super cool. And I'm glad you reached out. I'm glad I get to be a part of it.
I think that's a great note to end on. So thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure.
Well, girls, thank you so much. I appreciate speaking with you. And yeah, if you have any follow-up questions or anything, let me know. I'm just here in Oklahoma, so just keep up the good work, and I look forward to seeing more of the project.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye.
So, in conclusion, pirates were a mixed-matched patchwork quilt when it came to their fashion and their clothing, and did live quite a fluid and interesting life that created their own social rules. There's still so much more to learn about these incredible women, and I can't wait to find out more.
Oh, me too. They're so cool. They're really, really cool humans. Oh, we can't wait to talk to you on our next episode. And in the meantime, you can follow our Instagram. We are at ifclothescouldtalkaus. And if you have a question or a couple of suggestions, you can email us at ifclothescouldtalkaus@gmail.com. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to be notified when our next episode comes out.
And before we go, we would like to acknowledge that we are learning and creating on stolen land. And we would like to further acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people in what is now called Brisbane, and the Bidjigal and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation in what is now called Sydney. We pay respects to our elders both past, present and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded.
And we'd also love to thank our brilliant editor Rose and our wonderful sound designer Fee. Before we go, thank you. We would be lost without you. And we have a podcast. And you can check that out in our description. So until next time, guys, bye! Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye. Ah, she's gone. That was so cool! Ah, she's so cool. I want to be her when I grow up.
There's so many good quotes in there.
Oh, so many.
Every time she was like, there's a bit of pirate in every feminist. I was like, yes! Get it tattooed on me!
Oh my god.
And she,
The most iconic interview ever!